Okay. Okay, so welcome to the Finance, Administration, and Procurement Subcommittee Meeting for June 12, 2020. I just want to remind you that all votes need to be taken by roll call. And with that, I would like to just start with the roll call. So Hayward?
Here.
Oakland? Okay. And San Leandro?
San Leandro.
Okay. We do not have anyone signed up for public, oh wait, hold on. We don't have anyone signed up for public comments, although I do see attendees. So at this point, we could go ahead to the approval of minutes from May 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
Director Mandel, do you have any
I'll
comments?
go ahead. No, they were fine. I'll move approval.
I will second it.
Okay. So calling a vote, Hayward?
Yes.
Oakland's not here, and San Leandro?
Yes.
Great. The motion's passed. With
Excellent. Go ahead, Adrian. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, with that, we can go ahead to the fiscal year 2020-21 draft budget. And I will go ahead and put it on the screen.
And Nick, you'll be presenting this item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jason, though, we may ask Jason to jump in. So, you know, really the purpose of this presentation today is to focus on a couple specific aspects of the budget. You know, we presented this a little more than a month ago to this subcommittee. We presented it to the full board. We're going to be presenting the full budget again next week. So instead of going through all of the details, again, you know, many elements remain largely unchanged. There have been some small tweaks that have been made, you know, as we're fine-tuning our energy costs. Maybe there's a change there. So I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus really on two major items that I think would be most useful to get feedback on. The first one is, you know, in our presentation last month, we did focus on what we called sort of a no COVID scenario. So we did not explicitly modify our load or energy cost forecast to account for the load reductions associated with the pandemic. You know, we did have significant uncollectibles to address sort of the challenges customers may face when they have in their ability to pay, but we didn't change the load. Now, you know, we have experienced some amount of reduced consumption, somewhere in the order of 4 to 5%, with majority of that coming actually during the peak period. So you're seeing 10 or more % reductions during the peak. You know, our initial analysis before, as we were looking at this, we initially found that it was generally a break-even proposition. So while we lost energy, we lost revenues, it was offset by the reduced expense during the highest energy periods. We spent a lot of time the last month fine-tuning that analysis, and I think what we found is it's not strictly, it's not a revenue neutral proposition. You're probably looking at $3 to $4 million of reduced revenue, or I'm sorry, reduced margin. So it's around $8 million of reduced revenue and around $4 million of reduced energy expense. So the net effect is a $4 million impact on margin.
That's a big difference for such a small amount of net reduction in demand.
Yeah. I think, and this is why we want to talk about it, because it's, so we wanted to present sort of what we're calling the COVID scenario and the non-COVID scenario. And the reason why I think we want to talk about both scenarios is because it's really hard to say whether or not the load reductions are going to occur or to what magnitude they're going to occur, because in this particular case, it's so driven by the shutdown of business, not so much like a slowdown in the economy, but purely like buildings are closed. And so the question is, as things reopen, you're going to start, office buildings are going to be open. So when an office building opens, they're going to turn the HVAC on for the whole building. Stores are reopening, factories are reopening, and that's the pace at which that happens, and whether or not it happens and then it stops, really impossible to predict. And there's this other factor that we had talked about last month of, we are seeing increases in residential consumption. So some of the say like the commercial customer reductions, as you have businesses closed, factories closed, is offset because people are at home, they're running more AC. So there's even a scenario where you could envision more energy consumption, especially in the summer, than we would have otherwise asked, because you have people still are at home, but businesses are opening. So, I think it's in that context that we wanted to talk a little bit about your perspectives on, do we want to take, I think what we would say is the quite conservative approach in budgeting, which is to sort of assume that we will experience these COVID load reductions, recognizing that our expectation is that what we're forecasting here is sort of a reflection of kind of a worst case scenario, is if things do not reopen significantly over the next couple months. This is what this COVID scenario reflects. Or do we take a non-COVID scenario, which says, we do expect things to be reopening. And so because it's impossible to know exactly what's going to reopen when, we're going to assume it's sort of a wash, and we're going to not account for sort of potential COVID load impacts. And the major driver, or the major differentiation there is, in a to achieve the balanced budget in the non-COVID scenario, we only need to narrow the discount by 0.5%. To achieve that same balanced budget in the COVID scenario, which is with load reduction, we would narrow the discount down to 0.5%. Jason, are you on the line? I want to make sure I'm fully characterized. You've been most sort of in depth in sort of the COVID versus non-COVID details.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any other sort of underlying kind of COVID versus non-COVID assumptions that are worth characterizing?
I think you've nailed the big one, which is that, in order, because of the reduction of load, and the peak, and this reduction of peak demand, and to Al, to kind of touch a little bit on your comment, that we're seeing such kind of a large shift there is because it is in the summer months when rates are high. And so when we see that, like even a small marginal shift down, that translates to some kind of, or usage is high. So, we see a kind of larger shift there. So, but to get back on track, really the main kind of driver that's going to stabilize the budget is the value proposition on the bright choice option. Under normal conditions, with the hit from the PCIA, I think that we would still need to change that to a 1% discount. But if we're going to experience a significant drop in summer load, then I think moving that to a 0.5% discount is what's going to bridge that gap.
So yeah, I think that unfortunately, it's hard to sort of make a specific recommendation to say we should use the non-COVID or the COVID, because I think, it's almost a flip of a coin to say which one is a more likely to reflect what's going to happen. But one is a more conservative approach, which means narrowing the discount further. One is a less conservative approach, which means allowing for a slightly higher discount.
Hey, Nick.
Based on just a lot of uncertainty. I don't know, Howard, if you have any other thoughts you want to interject, please do, and then I want to.
Yeah, certainly nothing differs from what you and Jason have stated there, but maybe just a little bit more insight on the COVID load modeling and the sort of level of certainty / uncertainty that we have here. That's worth highlighting. First is to say that the COVID load scenario is, I wouldn't say it's a particularly conservative scenario, and it's not a particularly aggressive scenario. It is what kind of we think is a reasonable way to model the COVID load impacts. And what that currently reflects is in the near term months, and this is all detailed in the memo, but I think it is worth detailing a little bit. In the near term months of July, August, September, we see a greater impact from COVID load with a greater reduction of kind of 5 to 6% load reduction. And then it sort of trends towards a 1 to 3% load reduction in the October, November, December timeframe. And then in the January timeframe, it basically reverts to what we're sort of calling our normal load forecast. And so it's primarily an impact in the next 6 months, exacerbate a stronger impact in the nearer term months. So that's one thing just to be aware of. But I think it's worth noting it's really difficult to model the load impacts at the end of the day. We have March through June actual data right now, which is about 3 months of data, and that's just a very limited amount of time, and it's very difficult to normalize for weather and other things like that. And it's even difficult right now what we've laid out here and projecting the financials under a COVID load scenario. It's very challenging to say, we think we'll extrapolate from this 3 months of data, which between March and June, you start moving seasonally, which that in of itself is pretty difficult to say, like, you're going to uniformly look at a 3 month period, because March it was cold, in June, May, we started to see some heat waves. So they're even just those 3 months are quite different and have variability. And so to extrapolate from that and say, oh, we think this is exactly what the load is going to be. And, the exact load profile is pretty critical, of course, right? I mean, there are demand charge changes that will occur based off of the peak reduction that have a revenue impact that if you take a slightly different assumption, could be greater or less.
Yeah.
So I want to voice that just so it's very clear. It's
Yeah. And I think that's all just to sort of, there's all those factors, but again, a lot of the driver has to do with business shutdown, right? And so there's this whole other factor of our businesses. Is your view we're going to have a lot of business activity over the course of the summer? If so, we would actually reasonably expect our load to be closer to what it would have been, let's say, last year. But if we think businesses are going to stay closed, then we would expect these impacts. And so, it's sort of, do you take the more conservative approach, which obviously has a bit of a impact on customers because it means narrowing the discount, or do you take a more less conservative approach and say we're going to let customers keep a little bit more discount? And so again, I don't think there's a right answer, and that's why we wanted to bring it here for discussion.
Director Mendel, do you want to make some comments?
I guess, like staff, I'm sort of having a hard time saying, oh, well, it should obviously be choice A or B. I think that, so for both options, we maintain the promise for right choice, which is critical. And I think that we know that finances are likely to be tight for a while, with or without COVID. I mean, even the best case scenario here, we're basically breaking even for the year. And that's not where we want or need to be. We need to have a slight positive, and $400,000 doesn't even count. That's or $600,000. That doesn't even count. That's a rounding error on a budget of, $380 million. So I think that lowering the bright choice discount to 0.5% is inevitable and necessary. And then the only question for me becomes, do we do it now? Because we're going to have to go there. So we might as well, do it and be done with it, rather than having to go halfway and then do it again? Or do we go halfway and then and then lower it again, a year from now? And the only reason that I'm not just, hey, let's just do it now and be done with it. The only, I think, factor that has me hesitant to do that is that, folks are, struggling financially right now, and this is a time to sort of maximize the amount of discount that we can provide. I'm struggling. So Ed, if you've got some wisdom,
Sure.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. No, I think we're also hearing from Sierra Club, they want to sort of, keep costs low for residents, but maximize the use of the renewable energy and greenhouse gases. And I think that's their true north. And our financial stewardship is to making sure that East Bay Community Energy is a viable enterprise. And so between us, two of us in the team, the staff, we have to figure out that right balance. I did like the proposal in one of the notes to the base case that is, reducing the Brilliant 100 possibly in December. So that would be like a mid-year review of the budget, maybe having 6 months of actuals, and then looking at that sort of non-COVID perspective that you maintain. So just remind me, the Bright Choice, was that a discount of 1% or 1.5%?
So,
Or is?
yeah, so it's 1.5 currently. I think our original base case was 1%, and our sort of the view is if we want to maintain the more optimistic view about the course of COVID and its effect on load, then we would recommend maintaining a 1% discount. If we want to take a more pessimistic view about the course of COVID and its effect on business activity, then we would recommend a 0.5% discount. Now, Ed, you spoke to sort of the second item we wanted to speak to during this meeting, which is the treatment of Brilliant 100. So if it's helpful, I can jump into that as well, because we have a slightly different approach that we're proposing for the treatment of Brilliant 100 as well.
Yeah, and we don't have Director Kalb yet, so we'll continue, but let's try not to go too deep because we'll have to catch him up.
Okay.
In regards to it. But I mean, yeah, so the first thing you're saying, that maintaining the 1% discount on Bright Choice to PG is sort of what you're proposing for the following year. But to the question, we were previously at 1.5. So we're already reducing that discount by 0.5 point to help us have a balanced budget. I think that's really the first thing I want to understand and confirm with this team. Is that right? That we're at 1.5 then, and we're reducing it to 1?
Yeah, I think what we're suggesting here is the discount needs to be, our staff recommendation be either a 0.5% discount from 1.5 to 1, or a 1% discount from 1.5 to 0.5%. And the key determining factor of whether you reduce the discount to 1 or to 0.5% is, your feeling about the effect of COVID-19 on business activity over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, because that's fundamentally what's going to drive load.
Financially speaking, yes, but then we have to look at the lens of the people and then how to sort of manage that. But going back, there's another comment, I think, one of the reports about a 90% flight to Bright Choice. So can you speak to that more? I think I saw that one of the notes, are you going from Brilliant 100 and you see a flight to Bright Choice? Is that something because of the economy and the recession and what we see there, then therefore that?
No,
so I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So, what we had, when we're looking at Bright Choice, and this was in the discussion we had last month at the board, was if we're finding ourselves in a position where we are increasing the cost of Brilliant 100 from current parity with PG&E to above PG&E, our operating assumption is one or both of, we assume that one or both of the two communities that defaulted all customers onto Brilliant 100 would select to default customers back to Bright Choice. So as an example, if Hayward said, look, we just don't feel comfortable structurally increasing everybody's rates, we're going to default everyone back to Bright Choice. That was a modeling choice that we made, is we assumed that Hayward and Albany would make that choice. Now, if they don't, it actually has, it doesn't hurt your margin because
It's a wash.
It's a wash, but that was a modeling choice that we made. But we in sort of further considering the treatment of Brilliant 100, I think we felt that given that we wouldn't be moving the premium of Brilliant 100 up, say through 2 or 3% above PG&E on July 1st. It would be something we would need to do, say, in September or even in October to provide time to notify customers and for councils to take action. At that point, you might as well just wait until the end of the year, because of the way procurement works. We will have largely procured all of the carbon-free and renewables for Brilliant 100 customers by September or October. So you don't get the financial benefit of no longer of changing your procurement strategy. So and this is the second sort of change from last month, was the staff recommendation is hold the Brilliant 100 value proposition at parity with PG&E through the end of 2020, so half of the fiscal year. That's the first step. The second step would be close the product to new customer enrollment. So we're basically saying the customers who are Brilliant 100 customers are in that rate, but we're not going to allow any new customers onto that rate for the next 6 months. And then work with the board, between now and October 1st to determine the best course of action. Do we want to raise the Brilliant 100 rate above PG&E to 2 or 3% starting January 1st? Do we want to eliminate the rate? Does it make sense to have 3 rates where 2 of them are above PG&E? Maybe not. Maybe we should just have Bright Choice and Renewable 100. Maybe there's some incremental change you make to Brilliant 100, so it's not even the thing that we think of it as now, and it's slightly different than. But in all cases, because it always makes sense to start a new rate at the beginning of the calendar year because of the way procurement works. You count it over a calendar year, not a fiscal year, how much.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah. So that's the other major recommendation, is to just kind of hold Brilliant 100 steady for 6 months, give ourselves a little bit more time to think about what, if anything, should change. And if you're holding it steady, then Ed, you're not assuming any migration, because it's the value. It's it's priced at parity with PG&E. The other thing we're recommending is a slight reduction in the renewables to carbon-free ratio in Brilliant 100. So right now it's 40-60, and we were recommending for the rest of the year, we were recommending that we move it to 33-67%. So that slightly reduces some of the cost to help manage the fact that it is, we're not generating enough revenue to cover the cost. So that helps to narrow that effect. So there's really 3 steps. It's narrowing the renewable content and increasing the carbon-free energy content. It's closing the rate to new customers while maintaining the price parity with PG&E.
Do you mind if I jump in, Ed?
No, go for it.
So obviously I've spoken on this a few times. So a couple thoughts. Lowering the renewable content, while unfortunate, is a very reasonable thing to do and a necessary thing to do. And so while no one's excited about that, I think that we should just do that. If we can postpone until January the change in Brilliant 100, that would obviously be very helpful in terms of providing cities like Hayward and Albany and Piedmont, because all 3 of us have some customers that are defaulted to Brilliant 100, time to figure out what we're going to do. It'll also, and I've had discussions in Hayward. They're talking about, well, we see this thing coming. Should we be talking about it now? And I've actually encouraged them to not do that yet, because we need to give the city some sort of sense of what the choices are before we ask them to make a choice, right? So I would actually encourage us to try to figure out what the options are going to be sooner rather than later, and then give those 3 cities and customers that opted in as individuals, a few months to decide if possible, or at least a month or 2 to decide once we know, okay, here are your choices. We're going down to 2 products, or we're creating a new product, call it, carbon free or carbon 100 or whatever name you want to make up. And that's going to be at a premium. Now choose. I think that's the right way to go. And it doesn't, right now cities are a little busy. And so Albany, Hayward, and Piedmont, dealing with other things. And so, and we're in the middle of COVID, which is a difficult time to talk about, rates, rate increases. So if we can put that off for a couple months, that would be really helpful.
I'd like to note that Nick Filch has raised his hand. So Ed, whenever you want to take.
I don't know that he's allowed to speak.
Because this is a committee meeting, so he can listen. But I don't think it's a Brown Act because we have a majority of the board. I would have to defer to the clerk.
Adrian, we have Dan. Did you bring Dan in?
Yeah,
Dan,
I just brought him in.
Is he a panelist now? There he is.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. And I believe Director Pilch can speak as a member of the public, but cannot speak as a board member to this item.
Thank you for that.
And did we already have public comment? Not yet, right?
No, that has not been called yet.
Okay. If we bring up Director Cal up to speed, we can just speak to that we're reviewing the budget, a couple scenarios which may have more of an impact due to COVID on the base and revenue. And they're just looking at a couple options where you'd either sort of maintain status quo in certain essence or make some changes to really affect the budget. But nonetheless, maybe the direction this board may be looking at not changing sort of some rates until the beginning of the year. But I think the base case for the the Bright Choice, they're still looking at that 1% discount versus that 1.5 that we have in the past. In regards to this new budget and maybe reducing it further, that discount in December, it just depends so that we can have a balanced budget. But to what Director Mendel said, the $400,000 to $380 million is not really, it can swing each way because we might have to look at hedging, and that's something that was in your notes too. Like we're very vulnerable to the swings. So Director Powell, if you want to jump in, or Al, do you want to jump in there?
Just briefly, just 10 seconds, because I think that the major difference between the COVID and non-COVID scenario is that in the COVID scenario, we assume less load for longer. And as a result of that, and as a result of the hit to the bottom line, staff in the COVID scenario was recommending that the Bright Choice discount go to 0.5%, whereas in the base case, it's 1%. That's sort of the elevator speech difference as I heard it.
Yeah.
And looking for guidance, staff's looking for guidance on which scenario is the one that we should use.
Director Cal, did you want to speak to this?
You're muted, Dan.
There we go. Okay. I'm just looking at the sheet that we're looking at on the screen here, the budget scenarios.
Yeah. From the previous draft that we were looking at, there's about a $8 million drop in total revenue sales and about $7.5 million in energy operating costs. And I think there's some changes from the previous number. Not much of the overhead.
I actually find that the sheet not very helpful in understanding the difference. The difference is that in the COVID scenario, we assume a significant hit to revenues, a significant hit to the bottom line, and a decrease in the Bright Choice discount to 0.5% to make up for it. That's the choice that's.
I think what's
right?
most helpful to look at is if you look at the total expenses and interest. No, that's not right. Is that right? Never mind. Al, that's right. I think that's the way to really think about it is as you described.
And we have to also consider people's concerns about changes in rates. In the base case of 1%, going from 1.5 discount to PG&E to 1 and maybe to 0.5, and that's a bigger hit. And then we have concerns as well as the people. If we're making the premium with the Brilliant 100, people are going to leave that, cities will opt down. But I think what we were hearing here, that we don't want to maybe make those changes to the Brilliant 100 on those premium changes at this point, not at least until the end of the year. Maybe a mid-cycle review of this budget.
So is there, besides this one page, is there another handout that talks about the different?
Adrian, can you go to the third page, please? So this also sort of lays out, you know, the adjustments in what they are. But Dan, I think the two things that we're wanting to get feedback on, you know, pertain to whether or not to take a more conservative view about COVID. If the answer to that is yes, we should take a more conservative, then the staff recommendation is to narrow the discount further. If the recommendation is to we think things are going to reopen more, then I think we would maintain we'd maintain a higher discount. And the other is about the timing and the transition and treatment of Brilliant 100. The staff recommendation there is, instead of, you know, in say September, increasing Brilliant 100 costs, let's wait until the end of the calendar year, because that also aligns with how much we procure. Let's slightly narrow the relative renewable content. So slightly lower renewable content, slightly higher carbon-free content. So it's still 100% carbon-free, and then close the rate for the next number of months while we determine how we want to go forward with Brilliant 100 in 2021. So those are I think those are the two major points, Dan, that we want to get some feedback on.
All right, so first is, okay, so.
Yeah, we can give you a few minutes here, Director Cal. We can take some public comments if you'd like to, unless you want to speak to it now.
Well, okay, just want to kind of think out loud. Just we have the bright choice, but basically what you're saying is, are we going to go to 1% discount or just a 0.5% discount? Are you suggesting those are our two options?
Yeah, the options are, if we take I would say if we believe the business impacts of COVID are going to be more significant, we're recommending taking our discount all the way down to 0.5%. If we think the business impacts of COVID are going to be less significant, so more opening, then we're recommending only taking our discount down to 1%. So it's really it's a view of how you think the course of the economy is going to go over the next 3 to 6 months. And do you reduce the discount by 0.5% or 1%?
Yeah, I don't think we have any clue. I don't think we know the answer to how well the economy is going to go and what's going to get opened up, how slowly, how quickly, and whether it even regresses in the fall. This is new, so I don't think we have any basic information to be able to make an educated guess as to what's going to happen, which would suggest we should be cautious and move to a 0.5% in order to protect ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree.
And then the other, so that's the right choice. 0.5 versus 1 is the one question. The other question was premium or no premium, or when that happens for Brilliant 100, right? Is that the other question?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, you know, last month we had brought forward a proposal that, you know, increased Brilliant 100 to 3% to reflect the cost of service. We've done some additional analysis. It might not have to be 3%, maybe 2.5%, but based on some feedback from Al at the meeting and I think from Nick Pilch as well, we felt like at the very least the implementation of that change it can't occur on July 1st. It really needs to occur in September or October to allow those two cities in particular to review whether or not they want to maintain a kind of 100% default onto Brilliant 100. You know, that default was under the premise that it was at price parity. If it's now more expensive, maybe Hayward or Albany wants to default customers back to Bright Choice as an example.
Yeah.
And so based on that time frame, we felt that it actually probably makes more sense to just hold Brilliant 100 at the current parity with PG&E through the end of the calendar year instead of, you know, doing it with 3 months left. Part of the rationale is a lot of the carbon-free energy and the renewable energy that we will have bought for Brilliant 100, we will have already purchased and taken, taken ownership of, if you will, by the time you're in, say October 1st. So increasing, if you have a lot of customers migrating back from Brilliant 100 to Bright Choice in October, you don't really, the financial benefits don't accrue to you because you already incurred the higher procurement expense. So I think and then, you know, it also creates a very short period of time to really think about what to do. So instead we felt like better to take 3 steps. One is let's take a modest step to reduce some of their Brilliant 100 costs. So you bring the renewable content for Brilliant 100 for 2020 down to the RPS level, which is 33% instead of 40%, which is where it's at now. And then you increase carbon free from 60 to 67%. So it's still 100% carbon free. So that helps to sort of narrow some of the financial effects. You close the rate to new customer participation because it is a margin negative rate. You don't want lots and lots of new customers signing up. And also from a customer experience, if you're going to change it significantly in 6 months, you don't want people to go on to the rate thinking one thing is going to happen and then something change. So you close the rate to new participants. And then we spend the next number of months working with the board and our communities to really figure out, what do we want to do? Do we want to have Brilliant 100 be a premium rate, but it's a smaller premium than Renewable 100? Maybe that's the right answer and we can proceed with that. Maybe the right answer is to say, we only really need to have 2 rates. We should have a renewable rate and Bright Choice. So then you close that rate altogether. Or maybe there's some different approach that we take, that it's something else altogether. But, you know, we have a little bit of time to think about what that something else altogether might be as well. So we would effectively just hold steady for Brilliant 100 for the next 6 months, for the first 6 months of the year. But, you know, no new customers could participate either, so that you're not creating more customers in the class.
Okay. I might have one more follow-up question, but if we have, thank you. If we have time for public comment, we'll give them the 3 minutes if they want to speak.
Okay, then I am unmuting Nick Pilch, and hold on 1 second. Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and forgive me if this seems like kibutzing in your, or whatever the word would be in your meeting here. And I understand that I should comment as a member of the public. So starting out with some items of interest to the public. Number 1, the item is, the time for this item was mislabeled as noon. It was originally 3 p.m. and then it got switched by a clerical error, it looks like. Also on the website, I couldn't find a reference to the makeup of the subcommittees, which was interesting, and it made me think about that, because I note that I think 2 of the members of this committee are on 2 subcommittees. So that's some logistical things. I'll say is, I'll try to comment as a member of the public, I'm in one of those cities that defaulted to Brilliant 100. And I was very excited about this product because I thought, oh, hey, I can get a better mix, a better power mix, and still pay the same PG&E rates. I'm in. I thought that was a great move. And I would say that if that's going to change, then it has to be handled pretty sensitively, because I think that if there's wide understanding that that's changing, there could be some outcry. And then I think I agree that if we if EBCE is going to have two rates that are above PG&E rates, it might make sense to condense it into one, and maybe that is a better story going forward, that you're eliminating Brilliant 100 because you can't do it. You know, be honest that it's a money losing proposition. That might be a better way to also market it with those who are on that rate. So I'll leave my comments from there because obviously I have another forum where I can comment in. Thank you.
You may. Do you have other speakers?
That's it for there are no other speakers.
Perfect. Great. Thank you for that comment. One question for me is, do we have the impact on the residential side of the average bill rate for these potential changes and what that might look like for the average residential customer? Excuse me.
Yes, we do. It's not in this it is actually going to be, that's something we have in the presentation for next Wednesday. We have a bill, like a sample bill, a customer sample bill to sort of show what the dollar impact. I think we have one for commercial and one for residential.
And is it a significant swing on the monthly bill from going from 1.5 discount Bright Choice to say that 0.5?
It is not. You know, it's a,
okay.
I think it's no more than $1.50 a month.
And previously there was a proposal change to maybe just have no discount to PG&E for the Bright Choice. Was that something that was previously discussed?
We did not discuss that. Well, I mean, we've looked at it, and it's sort of it's an option on the table, but it's not one of the staff recommendations.
Okay. And then moving towards, thank you for clarifying that. And so then maybe we have to better understand if we want to keep the Brilliant 100, but not make a change at least until the end of the year. And I mean, if we're going to look at the cost of service, we want to at least be on parity with the cost of 3%. I mean, I think just because we might have that delta of confidence and everything's so unstable. So if we're looking at $1.50 change in a residential bill, it seems like it's not too much of a burden to lift, in my opinion. But you know, some other people might be more sensitive to that. Other comments from the committee?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in. So taking the Bright Choice discount to 0 is a non-starter for me, just since you mentioned it, Ed, because I've talked about the core promise of Brilliant 100, same price, 100% greenhouse gas free. The core promise of Bright Choice is that it's greener and cheaper. And so we can't, in my opinion, can't break that. And if Bright Choice were to become a 0% discount product, we'd have to terminate it and start with something new because it's a different product. I think that for me, as I think about this, since most of the Brilliant 100 customers are in Hayward, and the biggest decision in terms of load is going to come from the Hayward Council, what's due. For me, the option that I'm most comfortable with is saying, all right, you close off Brilliant 100 now, we make a decision that we're terminating that product at the end of this year. And users on that product need to choose a different one. And the cities that chose that as the default need to choose a different default. So that, if individuals don't take an action, they automatically go to, whatever default is selected by the cities. And, the simple version of that is what Nick described, which is just Bright Choice and Renewable 100. But I continue to feel, personally, I want a 100% greenhouse gas free option at as low a price point as we can offer it. I really want to see a product, again, I will call it, carbon 100 or, carbon free, that is available. I think that's something we want to have long term. And so in my perfect world, or as perfect as I can make it, the notification will be Brilliant 100 is going away in December. Please choose either Bright Choice, Carbon 100, or Renewable 100. And understand that, Carbon 100 has a 3% premium to Bright Choice. And Renewable 100 has a, whatever, I don't know what it is. Let's call it an 8% premium to Bright Choice. It's something in that ballpark, right? So pick. And then Hayward, Albany, and Piedmont. Let's not forget Piedmont, because their business customers were defaulted to Brilliant 100. Have a choice to make. And then individual users should also be prompted to make that choice. Most of them will ignore it. And so it's mostly the default chosen by those 3 cities that's going to really move the needle. That would be my preferred approach. And the sooner we can kind of settle on that, because that's revenue neutral, that's fair. Everyone's basically, paying for the product that we're having to procure on their behalf. And we've got a new carbon-free product that it's a premium product. And that, that's part of the deal. That's part of the elevator speech description of it, right from the get-go. So that's what I pick.
Can I clarify my understanding of what would be a carbon 100? Because right now we have Brilliant 100, and I think isn't that carbon or greenhouse free?
It is, but it's the same. The elevator speech tagline, whatever, Brilliant 100 is 100% greenhouse gas free, same price as PG&E.
Yeah.
So we're
talking about rebranding our second product.
Yes, effectively, it's a rebranding of it. And then with the rebranding or but I think rather than saying we're changing Brilliant 100, say, we're terminating it, we're offering a new product, and then let people choose. I think that's cleaner. I think that's cleaner than moving people automatically.
But you want to see that maybe they go from a Brilliant 100, and if you don't opt down or up, you sort of move into this carbon 100 model.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the different value proposition you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And it's not cost, it's not a loss, sort of on par. We're recovering the cost of service or cost of use. And this is something that we bring forth in next year, mid-year cycle for 2021.
Yeah, and it includes a notification after the cities choose the default. A notification goes out to every Brilliant 100 customer saying, our products are changing. The current product you're on is going away, but here are your 3 options, and the default option selected by your city is X. If you would like to choose a different option, please call this number, send us an email, send up smoke signals, whatever it is to change.
Mm-hmm. And I think there was a mix of the product, I think, earlier, or was there a change in the product mix? There was only a product.
We can do that on our own right away.
Because I was going to switch over. I think you were going to go, I think what I heard Nick saying was going to go from like a 33% to 40%, and maybe on the renewable, and I think the other carbon free was going to go to 67 more. So it was going to change it to be more, less costly, I think is what I heard.
Yeah, so that would just be for, right. So that would be for 2020. We would make an adjustment to slightly reduce the cost, the overall cost of the product. But, the fundamental rationale for the product is 100% carbon free. And so that's the customer commitment, and that's not changing.
We have a marketing person on this call.
Well,
help us with the marketing.
Thankfully, we will have time to think about the marketing implications.
Yeah.
We don't have to come up with all those details on the fly.
Okay.
Yeah, you have another committee for that.
Exactly.
Okay. Director Kalb, any other comments for yourself, sir?
There we go. No, I'm good. Thank you. do we have public comment?
I don't know if we have other comments. I'm not monitoring the chat window.
So is staff to take that as the two of you agreeing with what I just outlined, or do you want to think about it more, or you're not weighing in? Anyone is okay. I'm just asking.
I appreciate that. This is Dan. I'm not sure where I'm not sure yet where I land on the Brilliant 100 questions. Yeah, because I remember the presentation.
That's fair.
Before, so I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay.
Well, from my perspective, I really appreciate this conversation. It's helpful. I think for me, I think we have to look at how we can make Brilliant 100 stand on its own, and there might be a price increase there, or and then maybe sunset it. I think that's sort of a clean approach to do it, to transition people. I mean, it's sort of a transition from what I heard earlier. This was the commitment. It's better and cheaper than PG&E, but that's not sustainable, is what I'm seeing and hearing based on the cost structure. I think, Nick, you said you would change it, the mix, but you can't change it too much, because then I know how much would you make it. So if you kept it the same, maybe I'm just clarifying, if you kept the rates, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble, right, with the Brilliant 100, because I think I can hear the rationale to reduce the Bright Choice down to the 0.5, because this is going to take a while. I mean, people are going to move in back to their offices. Some people stay home. It's going to take a while for this U-shaped recovery. And you might have buildings go on, but nobody will be there. And then you also have people at home, so you're burning more energy. I think what's going to be happening, but we want to burn more clean energy, and hopefully we're the solution to that. More carbon-free, greenhouse gas-free. So we're probably gonna have both things going on at once, and we'll probably have a heavier load. There'll be less capacity, because right now I know from the corporate aspect, facilities are going on only like 50% capacity, where they're trying to put more people in the same space and drive more energy, but I don't think the buildings really can handle, oh, I'm only half the people. Well, you're in the building, you're using the space, it's gonna be on. It might not need as much power, but it'll still be on. So the basic fixed costs will be there of usage. And then you have people at home as well, where they can afford it and have that. So there'll probably be more demand. We'll have to produce more energy. And so it just, I think it makes sense that we'll probably see more energy costs, and we can't lose money with the Brilliant 100. So we have to find a way to be cost neutral there. And I think that's important, especially for those our residential customers. Commercial might not care as much, but for the residential, we have to make sure we understand if we're going to transition and change the value proposition, then we need to look at that through the marketing committee, how that changes. But I think that we have to get somewhere by December to change the costs. And I think we have to sort of slowly move into what Director Mandel said. I was like, okay, we have to notify people to change the rates, and maybe December is a good time to see that change, the value proposition or sunset of this product, and transition to something else happen. So I think that makes sense, because we don't have a loss, something we can't really pay for itself, subsidize. So I think it's important to balance that out. So based on the feedback, if we do the reduction 0.5 and wait till December to make any changes to Brilliant 100, what's our scenario that we're looking at then from your page 1? Are we closer to the non-COVID example or the COVID example?
That would be the COVID example. So Adrian, can you go back to page 1, please? So if we adopt that would be basically adopting the COVID scenario, which would result in a net margin of $230,000, as opposed to. In both cases, I will say we modeled the Brilliant 100 transition occurring on January 1st, not earlier. Mm-hmm. Now, if the board says, no, we want to increase Brilliant 100 costs as of, say, September 1st or October 1st, it does have it does help margins a little bit. But we think that it's hard to know how much, because it's very the customer migration piece is very speculative. Like, is it 70%? Is it 80%? Is it 50%? And that really drives the financial effects. So it's hard to kind of assess one way or the other, because there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
And just from an implementation perspective, we also feel like it just makes sense. It's cleaner to just keep Brilliant 100 in place through the end of the year. At sort of maintain the status quo through the end of the calendar year and then make a change. But so for the purpose of what you're seeing here, the difference of the 664,000 versus the 230,000 are really they relate to whether or not, you know, your view of COVID.
Yeah, I think the community is going through so much change. The less we change, the better. The instability that we're seeing across our regions. Our region is rather challenging for all of us. So, and then logistically, I'm hearing it's better to leave the Brilliant 100 alone. You might make some changes in the mix to make it, you know, not lose as much or subsidize as much. But at a minimum, we're going to reduce the Bright Choice to 0.5 point discount from PG&E.
So can I suggest something? You know, I'm not really hearing any disagreement on the, you know, lowering the renewable percentage. Not, you know, the board was pretty clear, not on the timing, but on the need to end Brilliant 100 if it's going to be a premium product and switch to something new. So I think at this point it's starting to become not a financial question, but a marketing one. And maybe what's needed is to take this to the marketing team and the marketing committee and say, look, we're going to end Brilliant 100 in December. And the two choices you have are just stick with the other two products and ask people to switch to one of them, people in cities to switch to one of them. Or do we create a new third product, you know, that's now at a premium that is a climate-free option? And have that conversation from a marketing perspective and a, you know, customer satisfaction perspective. Because financially, I think we've gone about as far as we can. And the next step is really to, you know, branding and customer retention and marketing. And then get their input. And then you can bring it back to the full board with sort of the guidance provided by finance and marketing and say, here's the proposed direction for Brilliant 100, or, you know, and let the full board weigh in. So, am I making sense there, Nick? Does that scan for you?
No, I think in terms of what we would do, I think what we would go forward with, I think generally what I'm hearing is a preference for the COVID scenario from a budgeting perspective. So a more conservative view, and look, if things are better, then we have more resources to supplement our discount in the future. And then for Brilliant 100, kind of status quo, but we are going to close the rate, so no new participation. And then we focus on engaging with the marketing committee and others to try to figure out what we should do next, because it is in large part a marketing question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to clarify, right now we're on par, or we're at a discount to PG&E for Brilliant 100. Is that correct?
No, we're at parity with PG&E.
We're parity. Okay, that's right. Okay, parity. Okay. Are you still going to reduce the mix there in the Brilliant 100?
Yeah, I mean that would be part of it. Is we would reduce it. It would be a modest reduction in the renewables mix, but it would be a reduction.
That would be
now
immediate.
for the new, but yes. Okay, good. That's good to clarify. I think those are the bullet points we need to make sure we highlight.
Yeah.
When we bring this forward.
Yeah, and those bullet points are all highlighted in the board memo that's going to be published, you know, in the next hour or so for for the board meeting on Wednesday. So, I think what we've put in the board memo, we've laid out it as options, but I think it very much aligns with the COVID scenario.
Okay.
So, okay. Well, those are the two major points. I mean, again, there are some. We did incrementally find some additional cost savings that we'll walk through on Wednesday, but they're modest. There was some marketing expense that we were able to further cut. We have in the last week secured an incremental grant of $275,000. So we're able to put that into local development, and we did make a minor adjustment to the amount of funding to the EVIP program. So we had suggested 4 million. We reduced the EVIP to 3,750,000, but then we added in 275,000 of grants that's going to COVID community relief. So the net effect is actually an net increase in local development from what we presented in May.
Great. If I may, I think I just want to clarify some things I saw in the rest of the presentation, and maybe you can highlight it for me. And then I'll just start with the first thing I have up. If I may, maybe it's take another 10 minutes here. Enacting a policy to allow staff to monetize P and the PTO. And for the other ones, you had merit-based adjustments and discretionary promotions. You had dollars there. Were you able to quantify that monetization of the PTO, or will you have something there to maybe look at?
Yeah, so we have, and Adrian, can you go to? I'm just trying to figure out.
You're page 8 of 13 on that
Can you go to
personnel
page
cost.
8, please? Yeah, so the monetization of PTO, reflects some $125,000. The problem with monetization of PTO is not everyone will monetize PTO, but if you assume everybody monetizes PTO, I think it was worth some 117, 127, somewhere in that order, $1,000.
And do you have that listed here as overhead operations or not yet?
Yes, it is. It is included in personnel costs.
Okay, great. That's good. Good call out, because I just wasn't quite sure. There's more of an unknown hit there to the bottom line.
No. Yeah,
great.
no.
Thank you for.
We assumed full monetization of all PTO from a. I think that was actually some feedback we got from our accountant. From a GAAP perspective, you need to consider it an expense, even if the expense doesn't get incurred.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's good. And then you have the new communities. You're thinking they're going to come online in April of next year. Is that what the idea was for that revenue?
I think that is our proposal. We have an item on the agenda, an informational item on this agenda, and we would expect to come forward in July with for a board vote on the integration of the new communities. Now, we also we present the budget two ways, with and without. With the new communities, you do see some incremental positive margin contribution. One of the challenges is, that very much fluctuates based on, energy market factors. I mean, I think the 2 some million gives more than enough buffer, though, to sort of ensure that, we're not going to lose money on bringing the new communities on. But I think the exercise we really wanted to pursue is we wanted a break-even budget without the new communities, and then the new communities provide upside to the finances of the agency.
I think that's in our packet too, right? Okay. And then I have 2 other questions. On the hedging, I think there was something about hedging or not hedging. Maybe we want to speak to that now or in the future about the risk that we have to hedge or not hedge. And there's a highly volatile swing, I think, they talked about. I think it was one of my other versions of the packet that I got that I highlighted the notes. But do you want to speak to that, or do we have more risk or something we want to do in that space?
Well, I think that it's not that, the challenge with hedging more is, it's highlighted by the COVID risks, right? So
yeah.
One of the ways we're able to offset the lost revenue from the reduction in consumption from COVID is through reduced energy expense. If the more hedged we are, the more susceptible we are to not being able to recoup reductions in energy expense because we've incurred the expense. So it's sort of this, you can buy insurance and, you reduce your risk, but, if you could end up, overpaying for that insurance. And so you're trying to find what that right level of insurance is. And so that's where we are right now, we feel is the kind of from a risk adjustment perspective, the right place to be. It's supported by our risk management guidelines.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't expect insurance people to give you a check back in the mail, then you're saying?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
your auto insurance. Okay. And the last thing, I think there was I think we were looking at borrowing interest expense, about 800 grand budgeted for the year. And that is, I think, commented on, I think, page 10, borrowing interest accounts for commitment fees on undrawn debt and the issuance fees for letters of credit assumes no outstanding debt. So that, is a big part of, maybe if we were reducing that somehow, then it would add to the bottom line because we're basically break-even budget. Is there something we could do there to reduce that cost, or is there that significant level of cost because of the letters of credits and having this line of credit available?
So, the commitment fees are sort of set in the agreements, and those are market rates. So there's really nothing we can do there. The only way to reduce the commitment fees is to reduce the overall sort of size of our credit facility. And I think we feel generally that given all of the uncertainty and risk factors, having more access to credit right now is better than less. In terms of the use of the letter of credits, they are extremely capital efficient way to post collateral. Howard, you can speak to this, but I believe that, our letters of credit are priced at or below the interest we receive in our interest-bearing accounts.
That's right. Yeah. There's no funding costs. So
funding costs. So,
it's actually like when we take our cash and put it in an interest-bearing account versus a letter of credit, it's almost a wash. So really the expense that we're talking about here is the commitment fee of having the facility, which is at 1%. And so it is very low. It's just that we have a actually fairly sizable credit facility. And we had actually intentionally upsized that just in light of the volatility and uncertainty of the environment. We felt like actually that was a pretty prudent decision. And, in light of a balanced budget, you're right, a few $100,000 does seem to have an impact, but given the protection it gives us from a working capital and cash perspective, I think I would advise we kind of maintain that. And this is about as low as it would get right now, since it's mostly just commitment fees.
Okay. Great. I think that's all I had. I might have had one more thing, but I want to see if the other board members have any thoughts or concerns.
I have one more question. So does the budget include a marketing expense for outreach to the Brilliant 100 customers, in the second half of this year to give them the option to make a choice?
It does not.
Probably needs to.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I would hope that we are trying to move away from paper notifications. This is not just for this, but for everything. We're trying to move to more electronic notifications, and we have email addresses for probably around 40% of our customers. So,
no matter what direction we move them in, if we take them off the product that they're on and give them a different choice as a default, we've got to tell them. We got to tell people. And if we only have emails for 40%, then there's going to be some piece of paper that goes out to the other 60% at the very least.
So let me talk to the marketing team about sort of budgeting for that. I think we should have a follow-on marketing conversation about the best sort of outreach strategy, whether it's mail or otherwise. But I take your point that we should make sure we have some resources set aside to do that, because one way or the other, we're going to have to do some marketing and outreach around that.
Yep. Thank you.
I think the ballpark on that, back of the envelope calculation, it would probably be in the order of like $50,000 to actually notify, say, 60% of the Brilliant 100 customers if you would do that. When you just think about the number of accounts we have, so it's not nothing, but it's not quite a needle mover.
Great. Dr. Kalb, anything else? Okay, great. And I think to the public speaker earlier, we might just want to follow up on their concerns about who's on what subcommittee and the timing about it. So I think that's important. And I thank you, Nick, for those comments. Coach and Nick, Chassett, the rest of your team, thank you very much. other items to cover, or is there anything else from staff?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. So I think you have some direction here. I don't think we need to take a vote, but I think you have some consensus. Unless the clerk, Adrian, do you have any other thoughts or concerns around that? We're good?
You all right?
All right.
Thank you.
Any other comments in regards staff or member announcements on future agenda or interest in something else? All right. And then I think, are we adjourning then to September? Is that what it says on the agenda?
Yes.
September 11th? Okay, well, I guess we'll adjourn this committee until then, and we'll talk next week then.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good job.